In the dark shadows, in the white cold, fearlessly we search for knowledge new and old. We drink the strong spirits and read the ancient tomes. The order of the Abracast. We are the brave and the bold.
Love and hate. Satanism represents kindness to those who deserve it instead of love wasted on ingrates. You cannot love everyone. It is ridiculous to think you can. If you love everyone and everything, you lose your natural powers of selection and wind up being a pretty poor judge of character and quality. If anything is used too freely, it loses its true meaning. Therefore, the Satanist believes you should love strongly and completely those who deserve your love, but never turn the other cheek to your enemy. Love is one of the most intense emotions felt by man. Another is hate. Forcing yourself to feel indiscriminate love is very unnatural. And if you try to love everyone, you only lessen your feelings for those who deserve your love. Repressed hatred can lead to many physical and emotional ailments. By learning to release your hatred towards those who deserve it, you cleanse yourself of these malignant emotions, and you need not take your pent-up hatred out on your loved ones. There's never been a great love movement in the history of the world that hasn't wound up killing countless numbers of people. We must assume to prove how much they loved them. Every hypocrite who's ever walked the earth has had pockets bulging with love. Every pharisaical religionist claims to love his enemies, even though when wronged he consoles himself by thinking God will punish them. Instead of admitting to themselves that they are capable of hating their foes and treating them in the manner they deserve, and say, "There, but for the grace of God go I," and pray for them. Why should we humiliate and lower ourselves by drawing such inaccurate comparisons? Satanism has been thought of as being synonymous with cruelty and brutality. This is so only because people are afraid to face the truth, and that truth is that human beings are not all benign or all loving. Just because the Satanist admits he is capable of both love and hate, he is considered hateful. On the contrary, because he is able to give vent to his hatred through ritualized expression, he is far more capable of love. The deepest kind of love, by honestly recognizing and admitting to both the hate and the love he feels. There is no confusing one emotion with the other. Without being able to experience one of these emotions, you cannot fully experience the other.
The Abracast, occult, history, conspiracy, and violence.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you for tuning in, clicking in, whatever. We're recording this evening from deep inside the hallowed halls of the Temple of the Order of the Shining Hexagon, from beneath the black obsidian altar of Nizaro, the Demon Lord. This is the Abercast, and I am John Towers. Tonight, we're picking up, we're going to do part 3 of the Satanic Bible by Anton, Szandor, LaVey. And we're recording here on Devil's Night. So, I mean, it's all, it kind of line right up. Sorry, I got to adjust my shit. I don't know who's down here before I come in to record. So before we get going, I got a few things. Next month, tomorrow, I'm recording the Fellow Craft episode, Patreon and Subscribe exclusive episodes. The Fellow Craft episode for November. I'm doing this on a full moon on Halloween. We're actually going to be doing magics from the 6th book of Moses. It's going to be really fun. I hand drew out all of the seals. If you're familiar with the 6th book, you'll find a lot of like really awfully reproduced versions of the actual seals for each of the 7 operations we're doing. I hand drawn, recreated all of those seals. I'm very proud of myself. It was a lot of work. So they're going to be available if you want to sign into the Fulgar Correspondentia. It's just a fancy word for the newsletter there at Advertise.com. Or there's a link in the show notes to subscribe. A lot of good stuff on the newsletter this month, including the graphics for these 7 seals. And then on November 1st, when I publish the episode, I'm actually launching a t-shirt with all of the seven seals of the 6th book of Moses on it. It looks pretty boss. So I mentioned the website is brand new, redesigned, new stuff on there all the time. The Discord, we have a Discord server. The invite is there's a permanent invite link in the show notes, and I also on the website. We've actually had a little bit of interaction. We had some fun. We had 3 or 4 or 5 people chiming in, sharing articles and ideas with each other. It was very good. We've tried this before with like a Slack work group and again on like Flickr, and I couldn't get anything that seemed like it worked, but this Discord thing is pretty cool. It's pretty easy. I don't think you have to download anything to do it. You might, I'm not sure. It's like a video, I don't know. But check that out. The 6th book of Moses stuff, the 6th book of Moses t-shirt, and then the graphic and stuff that's going to be available on the newsletter. And whenever you sign into the newsletter, you get a link to the newsletter archive, so you go through and see all the stuff that I've done for over a year now on the newsletters. So Halloween, this is Halloween. It's getting close. Well, no, it's actually after Halloween if you listen to this. So I hope everyone made it through okay, and I hope everyone had a good time. However, there is election night coming up, and we've all know what I've been talking about with the election interference stuff, the transition interference business. I hope everybody is safe. I hope everyone's got a couple extra boxes of rice or, I don't know, pasta or something in case the supply chain lines go down. And if not, hey, whatever. You got some food to take camping with you in the summer. But I hope everybody's ready. I hope everyone's ready for a long couple weeks. And with that being said, let's get into this. Let's get into this book, huh? So we did love and hate. What's next? Ooh, here's a good one. The next section is called Satanic Sex. Here's all to my Patreon and Subscribe Star folks. Thank you guys for supporting the show. Much controversy has arisen over the satanic views on, quote, free love, unquote. It is often assumed that sexual activity is the most important factor of the satanic religion, and that willingness to participate in sex orgies is a prerequisite for becoming a Satanist. Nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, opportunists who have no deeper interest in Satanism than merely the sexual aspects are emphatically discouraged. Satanism does not advocate sexual freedom, but only in the true sense of the word. Free love in the satanic concept means exactly that: freedom to either be faithful to one person or to indulge your sexual desires with as many others as you feel is necessary to satisfy your particular needs. Satanism does not encourage orgiastic activities or extramarital affairs for those to whom they do not come naturally. For many, it would be very unnatural and detrimental to be unfaithful to their chosen mates. To others, it would be frustrating to be bound sexually to just one person. Each person must decide for himself what form of sexual activity best suits his individual needs. Self-deceitfully forcing yourself to be adulterous or to have sex partners when not married just for the sake of proving to others, or yet worse, to proving to yourself. God, I destroyed that. It was not nearly as jumbled and shitty. That you are emancipated from sexual guilt is just as wrong by satanic standards as leaving any sexual need unfulfilled because of ingrained feelings of guilt. Many of those who are constantly preoccupied with the demonstrating of their emancipation from sexual guilt are, in reality, held in even greater sexual bondage than those who simply accept sexual activity as a natural part of life. Don't make it a big to-do over their sexual freedoms. For example, it is an established fact that the nymphomaniac, every man's dream girl and heroine of all lurid novels, is not sexually free, but is actually frigid and roves from man to man because she is too inhibited to ever find complete sexual release. Another misconception is the idea of the ability to engage in group sexual activity is indicative of sexual freedom. All contemporary free sex groups have one thing in common: discouragement of fetishistic or deviant activity. Actually, the most forced example of non-fetishistic sexual activity thinly disguised as, quote, freedom, unquote, have a common format. Each of the participants in an orgy removes all clothing following the example set forth by one and mechanically fornicate. Also, wow, I'm getting a little mechanically fornicate. I'm sure he's not talking about with like wrenches and hammers, just the mechanical utility of it. Also, following the leader's example, none of the performers consider that their emancipated form of sex might be regarded as regimented and infantile by non-members who fail to equate uniformity with freedom. This whole thing is he's actually brushing up against this a lot, and I dig it. I dig it the same way that I dig, like, when we run into these, it's kind of like an argument. Oh, God, I don't want to fucking say. It's like an argument against, groupthink, or it's an argument against, I don't know, socialism or communism, like everybody taking their clothes off and fucking each other just like the leader does. I guess that's an interesting way to look at it. It's not freedom. It's like a perversion of a free act, right? That's interesting. The Satanist realizes that if he is to be a sexual connoisseur, and truly free from sexual guilt. He cannot be stifled by the so-called sexual revolutionists any more than he can by the prudery of his guilt-ridden society. These free sex clubs miss the whole point of sexual freedom unless sexual activity can be expressed on an individual basis. I'm telling you. It's funny because you can't throw a rock. Looking at actual church, like Church of Satan, Satanism as a religion groups, you can't really throw a rock without hitting, in the first couple lines of their thing, like left-leaning. We believe in the progressive movement and all this stuff. And here is Anton, Szandor, LaVey, not talking about progressivism. He is not talking about collectivism. He is talking about, individual. He's talking about, he's certainly not talking about individual salvation. That's not what he's talking about, but he's talking about expression on an individual basis, which includes personal fetishes. There are absolutely no purpose in belonging to a sexual freedom organization. Satanism condones any type of sexual activity which properly satisfies your individual desires, be it heterosexual or homosexual or bisexual or even asexual if you choose. Ooh. Cancel culture's coming for Anton LaVey. Satanism also sanctions any fetishes or deviations which will enhance your sex life, so long as it involves no one who does not wish to be involved. The prevalence of deviant and or fetishistic behavior in our society would stagger the imagination of the sexual naive. Sexual knave probably makes more sense. The prevalence of the deviant and or fetishistic behavior in our society would stagger the imagination of the sexual knave. There are more sexual variants than the unenlightened individual can perceive. Transvestitism, sadism, masochism, urologia, exhibitionism, to name only a few of the more predominant. Everyone has some form of fetish, but because they are unaware of the preponderance of fetishistic activity in our society, they feel that they are depraved if they submit to their unnatural yearnings. Even the asexual has a deviation, his asexuality. It is far more abnormal to have a lack of sexual desire, unless illness or old age or another valid reason has caused the wane, than it is to be sexually promiscuous. However, if a Satanist chooses sexual sublimation over overt or above overt sexual expression, that is entirely his own affair. In many cases of sexual sublimation or asexuality, any attempt to emancipate himself sexually would prove devastating to the asexual. Asexuals are invariably sexually sublimated by their jobs or hobbies. All the energy and driving interest which would normally be devoted to the sexual activity channeled into other pastimes or into their chosen occupations. If a person favors other interests over sexual activity, it is his right and no one is justified in condemning him for it. However, the person should be at least recognize the fact that this is sexual sublimation. So this reminds me, so my wife loves things that aren't relevant anymore. So it's if she's watching something other than murder TV shows on cable, it's either the Golden Girls or far more likely Seinfeld. I actually had to get a Hulu membership just so she has access to every Seinfeld ever produced at the tip of her fingers. Anyhow, there's this famous Seinfeld episode where George stops George is like the dipstick. He's one of the dipsticks in the show, I guess. But he stops having sex and he becomes like a super genius because his girlfriend is having some kind of something, so they can't have sex for a week. I can't remember exactly what it is. But like he winds up like learning Portuguese and doing all these science experiments and stuff. And that's what LaVey is talking about here. In all of my years, whenever I had a dry spell, I did not turn to creating sexual experimentations or learning languages. So, I mean, I don't know, put that into the psychological profile. Because of the lack of opportunity for expression, many secret sexual desires never progress beyond the fantasy stage. Lack of release often lends to compulsion, and therefore a great number of people devise undetectable methods of giving vent to their urges. Just because most fetishistic activities is not outwardly apparent, the sexually unsophisticated should not delude himself into thinking that it does not exist. To cite examples of the ingenious techniques used, the male transvestite will indulge in his fetish by wearing feminine undergarments while going about his daily activities, or the masochistic woman might wear a rubber girdle several sizes too small, so she may derive sexual pleasure from her fetish discomfort throughout the day. With no one the wiser, these illustrations are far tamer and more prevalent examples than others which could have been given. Satanism encourages many forms of sexual expression you may desire, so long as it hurts no one else. I need to say a few things at this point right here. Is this talk about transvestites indulging, or even mentioning transvestites? This political correctness stuff is moving so fast. I don't know if what I just read is offensive to anybody. So if it is, that's not my point. I'm reading the work of Anton, Szandor, LaVey. And I did not attempt to make any of that a joke. I actually stayed far away from the use of some of the words that I might have used when joking around about these kind of things. So first of all, I want to say I'm sorry about... I'm not sorry about it. I just stuck to the word on the page, okay? But I am sorry if anyone got offended or if I stepped over any LGBTQ plus lines that are out there to be stepped on. I did not mean to do that. Second of all, I'm not a Satanist. I'm not a Satanist. A lot of this stuff, I don't know. I kind of don't know what to make. Don't know what to make of myself when I read some of these things. But I do think that all this stuff is super important, and whether people, QAnon and stuff, they talk a lot about Satanism. I was on the Deprogram podcast last week or 2 weeks ago with Adam from Conspiranormal, and they invited me on. Melissa invited me on to talk about Satanic Panic, and we, at the end, were kind of hashing out the difference between Satanism and like Luciferianism or whatever. And so I always, think that this is an interesting kind of just underline or highlight this, that Satanism encourages any form of sexual expression you may desire, so long as it hurts no one else. This statement must be qualified to avoid misinterpretation. Not by not hurting another. This does not include the unintentional hurt by those who might not agree with your views on sex because of their anxieties regarding sexual morality. Naturally, you should avoid offending others who mean a great deal to you, such as prudish friends or relatives. However, if you earnestly endeavor to escape hurting them, And despite your efforts, they accidentally find out you cannot be held responsible and therefore should feel no guilt as a result of either your sexual convictions or they're being hurt because of those convictions. If you are in constant fear of offending the prudish by your activity towards sex, then there is no sense in trying to emancipate yourself from sexual guilt, or no purpose is served by flaunting your permissiveness. The other exception to the rule regarding dealing with masochists, the masochist derives pleasure from being hurt. So denying the masochist his pleasure through pain hurts him just as much as an actual physical pain hurts a non-masochist. The story of the truly cruel sadist illustrates the point. The masochist says to the sadist, "Beat me," to which the merciless sadist replies, "No." If a person wants to be hurt and enjoys suffering, then there is no reason not to indulge him in his want. The term sadist is popular in popular usage, describes one who obtains pleasure from indiscriminate brutality. Actually, though, a true sadist is selective. He carefully chooses from the vast reserve of appropriate victims and takes great delight in giving those who thrive on misery the fulfillment of their desires. And the well-adjusted sadist is Epicurean in selecting those on whom his energies will be well spent. If a person is healthy enough to admit that he is a masochist and enjoys being enslaved and whipped, the real sadist is glad to oblige. Aside from the foregoing exceptions, the Satanist would not intentionally hurt others by violating their sexual rights. If you attempt to impose your sexual desires upon others who do not welcome your advances, you are infringing on their sexual freedom. Listen to this. It's like they have Satanism here. The Church of Satan has like a rule against coming on too hard. If people don't want, if you're coming on to someone and they're like, "Look, buddy, take a hike," then it's a sin to keep going, I guess. Or it's, you're violating their sexual rights if you keep hitting on them. That seems pretty civil. Therefore, Satanism does not advocate rape, child molesting, sexual defilement of animals, or any other form of sexual activity which entails the participation of those who are unwilling or whose innocence or naivety would allow them to be intimidated or misguided into doing something against their wishes. If all parties involved are mature adults who willingly take full responsibility for their actions and voluntarily engage in a given form of sexual expression, even if it is generally considered a taboo, then there is no reason for them to repress this sexual inclination. If you are aware of all the implications, advantages, disadvantages, and are certain your actions will hurt no one who does not wish or deserve to be hurt, you have no cause to suppress your sexual preference.
Learn more at abracast.com. Get bonus content by signing up for the mailing list. Get all that plus many exclusive episodes by supporting the show at patreon.com or subscribestar.com.
I just want to remind you to check abracast.com. Subscribe to the Fulgar Correspondentia newsletter. Get a lot of bonus content there. Check out the Discord server if you're interested in the chat. The Fellow Craft episode on Patreon and Subscribestar next month is we're actually doing magics on Halloween under the full moon from the 6th book of Moses. And the t-shirt in November will be the 7 seals from the 6th book of Moses, reproduced by my own hand. Check those out. So, here's like people would say, they would be like, well, communication is very important in a relationship and you should talk about it. This is like where you should like come up with your safe word or whatever and all this stuff. And I mean, that's fine. That's great. If that's the kind of person let me tell you how I deal with this situation is, I log into my wife's Amazon Prime account and I just go and browse all the weird shit, And then, so the next time she logs in, if she, you could just look down the bottom and it was like recently browsed. And it was like, oh, what's that? So, if something shows up in Amazon in the next couple days, then I imagine, okay, well, it's cool. This is going to happen. Or if she just looks at me like I'm really weird for a couple days, then I'm like, okay, well, I guess that's a no. All right, go ahead. Put that in the psychological profile. Just as no two people are exactly the same in their choices of diet or have the same capacity for the consumption of food, sexual tastes and appetites vary from person to person. No person or society has the right to set limitations on the sexual standards or the frequency of sexual activity of another. Proper sexual conduct can only be judged within the context of each individual situation. Therefore, that one person considers sexually correct or morally may be frustrating to another. The reverse is also true. One person may have a great sexual prowess, but it is unjust for him to belittle another whose sexual capacity may not equal his own, and inconsiderate for him to impose himself upon this other person, i.e., the man who has a voracious sexual appetite, but whose wife's sexual needs do not match his own. It is unfair for him to expect her to enthusiastically respond to his overtures, but she must display the same degree of thoughtfulness in the instances when she does not feel great passion. She should either passively but pleasantly accept him sexually or raise no complaint if he chooses to find his needed release elsewhere, including autoerotic practices. Overtures hit the lights. The ideal relationship is one in which the other people are deeply in love with one another and are sexually compatible. However, perfect relationships are relatively uncommon. It is important to point out here that spiritual love and sexual love can but do not necessarily go hand in hand. If there is a certain amount of sexual compatibility, often it is limited. In some, but not all, the sexual desires will be fulfilled. If Jeff Bezos blesses this union, there is no greater sexual pleasure that derived from association with someone you deeply love. If you are sexually well suited, if you are not suited to one another sexually, though, it must be stressed that the lack of sexual compatibility does not indicate a lack of spiritual love. One can and often does exist without the other. As a matter of fact, often one member of a couple will resort to outside sexual activity because he deeply loves his mate and wishes to avoid hurting or imposing upon his loved one. Deep spiritual love is enriched by sexual... Try explaining that. I am a child of many weddings and marriages and divorces. My parents started getting divorced when I was... They started getting divorced when I was 5 years old. And like every 9 years or so, they would get all new divorces. And I just imagine listening to them fight, listening to one set of parents or another, locked in a double wide, screaming and fighting. But I cheated on her because I was trying to spare you from this degenerate act I wanted to do. That's funny. I forgot where I lost my spot. Oh, here's a good place to pick up. Masturbation, considered a sexual taboo by many people, creates a guilt problem not easily dealt with. Much emphasis must be placed on this subject as it constitutes an extremely important ingredient of so many successful magical workings. Ever since the Judeo-Christian Bible described the sin of Onan, this is Genesis 38, 7 through 10, man has considered the seriousness and consistency of the solitary vice. Even though modern sexologists have explained the sin of Onan as simply coitus interruptus, the damage has been done through the centuries of theological misinterpretations. So I'm going to take a break real quick. I need to find my Bible. Genesis 38, 7. All right, let's revisit the sin of Onan. Genesis 38, 7. Check it in your Bible. But Judah's firstborn was wicked in the Lord's sight, so the Lord put him to death. And then Judah said to Onan, "Lie with your brother's wife, and fulfill your duty to her as a brother-in-law to produce offspring for your brother." What is this? Are we talking about Hunter Biden? What? Is this Hunter Biden's story? Put the crack pipe down, Onan, and sleep with your brother's wife. But Onan knew that his offspring would not be his, so whenever he lay with his brother's wife, he spilled his semen on the ground to keep from producing offspring for his brother. And what he did was wicked in the Lord's sight. So he put him to death also. Well, that started out as a Hunter Biden story, but I don't think he owned anybody. He didn't do the owning. All right, enough of this. Back to the book. Aside from actual sex crimes, masturbation is one of the most frowned upon sexual acts during the last century. Innumerable texts were written describing the horrific consequences of masturbation. Practically all the physical or mental illnesses were attributed to the evils of masturbation: parlor of the complexion, shortness of breath, furtive expressions, sunken chest, nervousness, pimples, turning into a fucking werewolf. It's all there, right? We talked about this. And if you go back to the featured topic link on Advertise.com, you find the sexual magic section. We talk about this quite a few times. When you jerk off and you, I don't know how else, when you come in a place where you're not coming to reproduce. You're creating a klipothic entity. And this is all about the sephiroths of the tree of life and the shells around these lenses and all this stuff. If you're interested in that, or why masturbation might be like this evil or, I don't know, problematic act, you might want to check out those couple episodes there. I can't remember exactly what they're, klipothic entities or something like this. The lurid, I have lost my place. The lurid descriptions in such texts would be almost humorous if they were not for the unhappy fact that even though contemporary sexologists, doctors, writers, etc., have done much to remove the stigma of masturbation, the deep-seated guilts induced by the nonsense in those sexual primers have only been partially erased. A large percentage of people, especially those over 40, cannot emotionally accept the fact that masturbation is natural and healthy. Even if they now accept it intellectually, and they in turn relate their repugnance, often subconsciously, to their children. Look, I think this is something that's busted wide open, right? I think in the age of the internet, in the age of Pornhub, unless you're walking down the street doing it, I think that this stigma has kind of been lifted. What do you think? Do you think that's the truth? It was thought that one would go insane if, despite numerous abnegations of this autoerotic practices persisted, the preposterous myth grew from reports of widespread masturbation by the inmates of the inmates of mental institutions. It was assumed that since almost all incurably insane people masturbated, it was their masturbation that had driven them mad. No one ever stopped to consider that the lack of sexual partners of the opposite sex and the freedom of inhibition, which is the characteristic of extreme insanity, were the real reasons for the masturbatory practices of the insane. This is in pop culture. This is in Silence of the Lambs. I'm talking about the real Silence of the Lambs, not this gay TV, homosexual TV. You know what I'm talking about. This is multiple Migs in his cage in the basement. I smell your cunt. Whack, whack, whap, whap. It's actually Wham, wet ass Migs. Wham, WAMM, wet ass multiple Migs. Many people, I'm falling apart here. Many people would rather have their mate seek outside sexual activity than to perform autoerotic acts because of their own guilt feelings, the mate's repugnance towards having them engage in masturbation, or the fear of their mate's repugnance. Although in a surprising number of cases, a vicarious thrill is obtained from the knowledge that the mate is having sexual experiences with outsiders. Oh, brother. Although this is seldom admitted. The stimulation is provided by envisioning one's mate sexually engaged with another. This should be brought out into the open, where both parties may gain from such activities. However, if the prohibition of masturbation is only due to the guilt feelings on the part of one or both parties, they should make every attempt to erase those guilts or to utilize them. And many relationships might be saved from destruction if the people involved did not feel guilt about performing the natural act of masturbation. The 5-knuckle shuffle. Masturbation is regarded as evil because it produces pleasure derived from unintentionally fondling a forbidden area of the body of one's own hand. The guilt feelings accompanying most sexual acts can be assuaged by the religiously acceptable contention that your sensual delights are necessary to produce offspring, even though you cautiously watch the calendar for the safe days. You cannot, however, placate yourself with this rationale while engaging in masturbatory practices. I mean, I think that I'm done with all this jerking off stuff, right? Okay, well, no matter what you've been told about the Immaculate Conception, even if blind faith allows you to swallow this absurdity, you know full well if you are to produce a child, there must be sexual contact with a person of the opposite sex. He puts an exclamation point here. Very aggressive, Mr. LaVey. Reverend LaVey, I don't know, High Priest LaVey. If you feel guilty for committing this original sin, you certainly will feel even deeper guilt by performing a sex act only for self-gratification with no intention of creating children. The Satanist fully realizes why religionists declare masturbation to be sinful. Like all other natural acts, people will do it, no matter how severely reprimanded, causing guilt in an important facet of their malicious scheme to obligate people to atone for sins by paying the mortgages on temples of abstinence. It goes on here for a little bit, but this seems like a really acceptable place to end for the evening. Remember, election night's coming up. If you haven't done so, get out and vote. It's against my ethics to tell you who to vote for. But, I mean, Joe Biden doesn't know where he's at. So take that for what it's worth. And be careful and be ready, because I think that we're going to have a couple weeks of really crazy times coming up. I mean, like rioting in the streets, cats and dogs living together, mass hysteria. Please consider supporting the show on Patreon and Subscribestar, or Subscribestar. You don't have to do both of them. Actually, I don't want you to do both of them. I have Subscribestar because it's less big brothery than Patreon is, and there's some people out there that just won't do Patreon, and I'll never get kicked off of Subscribestar, so when I archive shows, I archive them there. And that's it. Fellow Craft episodes coming up. The 6th book of Moses. I'm recording it tomorrow night under the full moon on Halloween, when the veil between the worlds are at its thinnest. And check out the t-shirt. It'll be up by the time this is posted up, it'll be up real soon. It'll be up. You can check the storefront on Advertise.com on the 1st. At some point in time, it'll be up. The newsletter will go out. If you sign into the newsletter late and you miss the graphic or whatever, you get a link to the archive for all the newsletters there. And yeah, that's it. This is the Abercast, and I'm John Towers. And thank you guys. Hope you enjoy the show. Please be careful. Please be careful. Take care of yourself. I hope you guys got a couple magazines, extra magazines for the guns you guys got. I hope you got a couple extra beans and bullets and band-aids to get yourself through this.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Send an email or visit us on social media to let us know what you think about this topic. And please remember to leave a 5-star rate and review.
Hey, did you learn something? Did you laugh? Supporting me is a way for you to be a part of the Abercast and ensure its growth and sustainability. It also means I can create a normal schedule for shows and bonus shows, as well as the exclusive Fellowcraft episodes. By supporting the show, you are not only a listener, but you are a part of the show. You supporting the show gives me a way to offer fun rewards as a thank you for showing your appreciation and support for our projects. Do you have an idea for a reward that you don't see? Let me know. My supporters are my partners. I currently pay for you to listen to the Abercast. Not only do I pay the hosting bills out of my own pocket, I volunteer my time and talent to each and every episode of the Abercast. The price of books, the time and resources of reading and researching, the massive amounts of gin and tonic needed, the equipment it takes to record the shows, the time and resources it takes to create the bonus material, and the cost to maintain the internet presence. Is it worth your support? I don't know. I'm proud of the Abercast, and I feel like I'm improving all the time. In addition to creating the show that you dig and that you are excited about, I also have a full-time commitment and other obligations. So why financial support? All of the supporters help me focus my time on the quality and development of the podcast. And what if you can't afford, $1 or $3 or $10 or whatever a month? Believe me, I get that. There are many degrees of support, but if you can't support the show financially, please consider leaving a 5-star rate and review on your preferred podcast app. And don't forget that you could sign into the mailing list and still unlock a lot of bonus content. Thank you. I cannot put into words how much it means to me that you listen to the show each time I post a new episode. Your feedback, support, and love of the stories that we talk about here is what keeps me going.